So for today, what I'd like to do is talk about what I'm going to call individual power games. These are generally some abstract games that we're going to be taking a look at today. And these games are special to me because they all involve pieces that have individual powers, individual abilities. So they kind of remind me a little bit of chess in that regard. So let's say you found the wonderful game from Catalyst Game Labs called The Duke. This is definitely a special power game, and we're going to take a closer look at this one for just a moment. Now, I call the Duke a special power game because the Duke is made up of tiles that look just like these. Now, these tiles, for example, are the Duke tiles. This is going to be what the players are going to start with. But you'll notice that every single tile is double-sided. So this would be the tile for one player, this would be the start tile for another player. This is the Duke. Instead of chess, where you're trying to capture the king, in the Duke you're trying to capture the Duke. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that every piece in this game, and I'll bring out another one for example here, every piece in this game has some sort of special kind of a grid printed on it. And the grid is going to show you how the piece can move. So for example, the Duke, when you take a look at this, can move to the right or to the left, sliding as many spaces as it would like. Whereas the pikeman can move, kind of sweeping his pike to the right or to the left, but always forward. So just like chess, each piece has its own unique movement. However, what makes the Duke a little bit more interesting, at least for me, is that every time you move a piece in the Duke, you're then going to flip the piece. And when you flip the piece, you're going to see that the pieces have now different movement abilities. So for example, now the Duke is going to be able to slide forward and backward. The pikeman is going to be able to retreat backwards. He's going to be able to move one step forward, or he's going to be able to do what's called a strike, where he's going to be kind of stabbing out and forward with his pike. So you're going to use these pieces, and there's a large variety of them, in order to try and capture the other player's Duke. This is an example of the champion. Both pieces are double-sided, as I said. So this is why I call these individual power games, or special power games. And the Duke is a fantastic example of this. Now let's say the Duke is a little bit too much. There's a little bit too much variety, and you're looking for perhaps a little bit of a step back. Well, that might be when you would come into a game called Hive. Hive's been around for quite some time, and it is once again a special power game, and once again it's a two-player game, and once again it involves trying to capture the other player's main piece. In this case, they're queen bees. Now just like the Duke, there are also many other pieces that can be brought into the game. And just like the Duke, each of these pieces has its own special powers for movement. What is a little bit different, that makes this game a little bit of a step back, is that none of the pieces have a reverse side. None of the pieces will change. Their movement will always stay the same. So, for example, an ant in Hive can move as many places around the hive as you can make it go. So, the ant can move almost in an unlimited fashion. Grasshoppers, as you can imagine, can jump over to a new position on the hive. The only main rule is that you cannot break the hive by moving another piece. So for example, this piece would not be able to move until perhaps another piece was added that can keep the hive all together while this piece then moves about. If you can ever completely surround the queen bee, you've won the game. So, Hive is a great example of another game that uses special powers and yet is a little bit of a step back from something like the Duke. Now if you're looking for a game that might be a little bit of a step up from the Duke, you might want to consider Scott Caputo's Voluspa. This is a retheming of an earlier game of his, and it's currently available and published by Stronghold Games. Now, what makes Voluspa an interesting addition to this particular genre that I'm talking about, which is individual powers, is that each tile, just like in Hive, has its own unique abilities. And just like in Hive, everyone is going to be building off of the same interconnected set of pieces. Okay? However, the difference here, one of the reasons that I feel this is a step up of a game, is that the tiles are all the same for both players. So we don't have individual player pieces and individual player colors. And this is the first of these series of games that doesn't involve capturing a piece from your opponent. Okay, so it's not about capturing the queen bee, or not about capturing the duke, or capturing the king in the case of chess. Here in Voluspa, every tile has its own unique abilities. And for an example, we have here the Fenrir tile. Okay, so Fenrir the wolf has a power of 4. Okay, when you place him in a row, or if you place him in a column, if his number is the highest, you're going to score 1 point for every tile in that row or column. Okay, so great way, easy way to score points. However, you can see over here the Thor tile, he has a value of 7. Much more powerful than Fenrir. However, if you look at the little icons here on the tile, you see that Fenrirs can work together in packs. So for every Fenrir in the same row or the same column, they are going to add their strength together. So if I had a second or a third Fenrir, then each of these would actually be worth 8 or 12 points respectively. So they can hunt in a pack and take down even the strongest tiles. The Loki tile over here is another example, and what this tile does is any tile that he touches now becomes a 0. So he actually negates everybody that he touches. He's the trickster. And there are other examples of really interesting tiles. The dragon, for example, can go on top of another tile, and he has a value of 5 all on his own. You have to have Odin, of course, and Odin's only ability is that he's an 8. He's the most powerful tile. So he's almost like the king piece, or the duke piece, or the queen bee piece. So as the game continues, the players are going to be adding different tiles to the array. And every time you add a tile, if it's the highest value in the row or the column, you're going to score points. So Voluspa quickly becomes a very interesting spatial game, and one in which there's a lot of jockeying for position, one in which there's a lot of trying to find the best place to put your piece. So it's not just about hunting something down, it's about trying to cleverly place your tiles in order to be able to score points. Another example here would be a Valkyrie tile. If you place a Valkyrie tile down, she's only worth 2. But if you can get another one on the other side over here, well then because they bookend the row, it doesn't matter if there are higher value tiles in between, she'll be able to score 1 point for every tile in the row that she is in. So if you enjoy games with special powers, you really can't go wrong with a game like The Duke. The Duke is a fantastic game that introduces some really unique mechanics such as alternate movement on opposite sides of the pieces. Great game. If you want a little bit of a step back from that, you can't go wrong with Hive. A fantastic 2-player game as well, where you're going to be trying to capture the other person's pieces using unique movement. And finally, we have Voluspa. If you're looking for a little bit of a step up from the Duke, I would highly recommend Voluspa. A much more sort of strategic and nail-biting kind of game that offers more options for clever play. Another 2-player game that's a fantastic step up. So there's my recommendations for a step back and a step up for special power games.